Welcome to another episode of You Are the One You Seek. My name is David, or Dr. Cranch, or Silly Spaghetti Monster, whatever you want to call me. I'm here with my good friend, Sean Bonbon of Bonbon's Nook. Sean, how's it going, man?
Hey, it's going great. Nice sunny day here in Eugene.
That's what I like to hear. It's usually raining out there, isn't it? I thought that's the stereotype.
It's a real mix, we get our sun breaks, we get our sunny days occasionally, and really grateful. It creates a lot of contrast when it's wintertime and you've got just long runs of rain and clouds, and then the sun comes out. It's glorious. Appreciate it a lot.
Nice. Yeah, now you've told me before you really are into being in nature as much as possible, earthing, and
Yeah,
maybe explain that for people who don't know what earthing is.
Yeah, the earthing has really improved my life actually. I try to get about 30 minutes in a day, roughly, sometimes more if I can. And it's just as simple as going outside and finding a piece of land that's, got either grass or dirt or something, putting your feet on it. And you could be sitting, you could be standing, and you're just reconnecting with Mother Earth. And there's actually a lot of science behind it. I can't recall, the specific scientific studies that have been done and all of that, but there have been a lot of studies done around earthing and the positive effects for inflammation, energy levels, all kinds of things. It rebalances your system basically by the simple act of just putting your bare feet on the earth. So simple, almost so simple that people overlook it, or forget about it. That's a thing you can do, and really worth the time. And you can always, like read something, listen to a podcast, listen to this podcast, and pass the time easily where you're sitting or standing. Like I kind of alternate between standing and sitting. And the hardest part about it is when it's really cold, when the ground's really cold, and that initial shock of putting your feet on the ground can be a little much, especially if it's like almost like feels like it's freezing or something like that. But I just get through that initial, I'm bundled up the rest of myself and just get those feet on the earth. And man, since I've been doing it, I've noticed a lot more energy, and it's been really improving my life. So I recommend it to everyone.
That's awesome. Do you ever kind of set an intention or meditate when you're doing it to sort of, either like show gratitude towards Gaia or just to focus on something in your life that you want to improve?
Yeah, I'm not super intentional with it, but it's just kind of a natural thing of when I make that contact with my feet on the earth, I am thinking about Gaia, Mother Earth, thinking about the planet as a living being, which I hope more and more people can start to do that aren't doing, because I think that would fix a lot of problems if we all saw it as a living being. But yeah, so I have that intention or that awareness, just kind of a general awareness that I'm connecting, and do a little bit of meditation and just gratitude practice, just being grateful for different things in my life and people in my life.
Yeah, for sure. Well, you've been in Oregon for how long now?
I've been in Oregon for since the beginning of, or so the end of 2018. So that would be going on 4 years,
Okay.
right? Yeah, so 4 years in Oregon, and before that, I lived in Olympia, Washington, for 5 years, and before that, I lived up on the Kitsap Peninsula near Gig Harbor, around in and around Gig Harbor, Washington, which is across the Narrows Bridge from Tacoma. And the Narrows Bridge is that wiggly wobbly bridge that they had to rebuild during the windstorm. Everyone's seen the footage of it, like bouncing all around, and
Galloping
yeah,
Gertie.
galloping Gertie is what they called it. Yeah. So I grew up there, and moved to Olympia in 2013 and just fell in love with it because it was the first time that I felt like I found people like me. Growing up in Gig Harbor, I did not resonate with the local culture and the people there, and felt very much like an outsider, could not connect, and was very frustrated. And so when I found Olympia and met my love, who I started a chocolate business with by accident. She had actually already had it going, and then I got together with her in late 2013, and then 2014 we started really turning in it. She started in 2011, but it was very small, just kind of at Etsy and the co-op there and stuff. And then we started to turn it into a bigger business and through the website. And it's called Pure Love Chocolate. It's purelovechocolate.com if anyone wants to check it out. It's a sugar-free, stevia sweetened chocolate. We've been doing that for a decade now, and it's been amazing. And it's taught me so much. I've grown so much through starting that business with her, and we're no longer romantically involved, but we're still great friends and great business partners. So it was quite a quite a journey. Living in Olympia for 5 years, I did a lot of shadow work living in that place. It's an interesting place to live, interesting energetics, and yeah, it taught me a lot. And was very excited to move to Eugene. I was really ready to move out of Olympia when that 5 years was up, and being in Eugene has been a dream come true for me. And I don't, there's nowhere else on the planet that I can imagine myself living. Like, this is definitely where I want to live and where I want to have roots, continue to put down roots. And I've been meeting a lot of great friends here and making community. And I feel like there's so much potential for me here. So I'm really happy.
Would you say then, if you had to look at your life like it was on a soul plan that you made before you got here, that your soul had this thing in mind that you wanted to do, does your life now feel kind of like you're in some way, and I know it's hard to really know if we're actually living up to that plan, but does it feel like to you you're on a path that is resonant with maybe something you had kind of planned out ahead of time? Or do you even just not think of it that way, just day by day?
Yeah, I mean, these days I kind of am more in the moment, day by day, and using a lot of that kind of emotional guidance system of going toward what feels best in my heart and in my just in my emotions. Like, if I feel myself starting to go in a direction where it's not feeling right, then I'll kind of backtrack and be like, oh, maybe that's not quite the right direction for me to go or the right project for me to get involved with. So I'm very much tapped into how things feel now, and that's really helping keep me on the right track. But overall, yeah, I do feel like there have been times in my life where I was very stagnant and not on the right track, and not expressing my creativity, not doing too much for other people and not considering what my own needs were. I fell into that a lot. And so in those moments, I definitely felt like I was kind of going off track and kind of caught in a loop and things like that. But overall, at this point in my life, I do feel like I'm on that trajectory. That's my highest version for my soul. Yeah, I feel good about that.
Well, that's a pretty incredible place to be, and I know a few people in my life. You are one of the rare few who just, I can really sense that you're following your bliss, you're doing things that bring you joy, and you're filtering out the things that don't work for you and don't bring you life and love. And so I would love to say, anyone else can copy that, right? And just be like you guys. But I think we're all on our own very unique journeys and paths too. And maybe it's not as easy as just let me do exactly like Sean's doing and expect the same result, because I might have all of these different things that are in my way that I have to get through first before I'm even able to get to that place where I can just let kind of things be as they are, and navigate it on a heart level and more moment to moment what's bringing me joy. And for someone like me, I'm just in my head all day thinking through 50,000 scenarios about the future and feeling paralyzed by that. And there's just something I gravitate towards with souls like yours that are just kind of more like in the moment and enjoying life kind of for what it is. And I think what it, to me, what sort of it should be is just expressing ourselves and not being so terrified of what everyone else thinks of us. But curious what your thoughts on all that are.
Yeah, I agree so much with what you said, because everyone's journey is so personal, and that's why the whole guru thing or putting someone up on a pedestal or trying to be like someone else usually doesn't pan out. But it can be very helpful when you see someone and you're inspired by their life and how they're living and their trajectory, and then you take that inspiration and find a way to integrate that into your own life, which then comes out as your own version of I guess what you've been inspired in them, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, just integrating that into your own life, and how it applies to your own trajectory and your own journey, which is also personal for all of us. And I really appreciate the level of awareness and consciousness that you have, David, with what you're doing in life and where you're headed and what you're wanting to offer people through this podcast specifically. I'm seeing that as like a really great way for you to be of service in the world. And I'm so excited to see where this podcast goes. And I'm really appreciative that you had me on to have this conversation. It's an honor.
Yeah, man, I'm so happy to have you on here. We've been talking about it for a while. You know, we've been friends. Just to give a little context, we've been friends since you were living out on the Kitsap Peninsula with my brother Mike at the time. Well, we were friends longer than that. We hung out a few times when I was still I don't know, 15, 16, and
Yep, I remember
I
that.
was getting my introduction to cannabis by way of pestering my brother and saying, "Please, please let me get high with you." You know, it wasn't the typical older brother being a corrupting influence like I think, probably my parents thought later. It was more like I was going through a way unnecessarily too complicated breakup in ninth grade summer. I dated this girl for a year and a half, and I was sure we were going to get married. Like, that's how much of a hopeless romantic I was. And I remember when we broke up, I was just kind of like, I'm free, I'm liberated, I can do as I please now. Not that I couldn't before, but I had this whole mentality that I must submit to her on every level. And as you can imagine, that precipitated a not very healthy relationship. So I was ready for exploration, and my brother was kind of like, I don't know, man. You're my younger brother. I could feel that love and protection come through just a little bit. He had a hard time showing it, but he was
Yeah.
terrified of frying my brain. But I'll never forget just laying on his bed, I think, with like you and him, and maybe Derek was there, and staring at these glow in the dark stars or whatever he had on his ceiling, and just
No, I remember those. Yeah.
letting our minds expand to this beautiful new plant that I had finally gotten to try after hearing about how terrible and demonic it was. So to me, that was a great bonding experience for me and you too, because we weren't exactly in the same social circles or same school or anything like that. And I'd kind of inserted myself into my brother's friend group, which was sort of a taboo. But I'll never forget how impactful that was, and just how much I can see now how important it was for me to have met you and continue that journey, and how instrumental my brother was in shaping my ability to kind of get to where I'm at now, which I don't know what that is. But maybe let's talk a little bit about your time there with Michael, or maybe if you want to back up, you can even go kind of to your early in your
Yeah,
life and what.
I could go back to when I met your brother, and that was in high school, and that's actually right around, I mean, that was when I had my spontaneous out of body experience. I could go into that and kind of set the scene that way.
Yeah, I'd love to hear all about that.
Yeah, okay. So, when I was around 16 years old, I was lounging in a one of those recliner chairs. It was like a big pink recliner chair in my downstairs in my parents' house where I was living, and I was like kicked back in it and just kind of dozing off a little bit. And I started to hear this sound that was unique that I had not heard before, and my body started to go into this semi paralysis state, and I started to separate from my body spontaneously. I was completely sober. There was no drugs involved in this. It was just a experience I started having, and when I think I freaked out a little bit as it was happening because I didn't know what was going on. But I started to come out of my body a little bit, and in that moment, there was distinctly I could sense or see, or I knew there was three individual entities around me, kind of like to the left, right, and back of me, and they were saying my name and saying, it's okay, we love you, that sort of reassurance to try to make me feel calm so that I wouldn't snap back into my body. So it was a very fleeting, short moment, but it was definitely not a dream. It was very much like in real time happening, and I was lifting out of my body a little bit, heard those voices, sensed those beings, and then you know I couldn't. I was too afraid of what was going on, so I snapped back in my body and was just like, "Whoa, what was that? That was not anything I've ever experienced before." And it blew me away, and I was just like, yeah, tripping out about it. And this was at a time in my life where I was really lost as a teenager. I could not figure out the social scene of high school. Like, I was not a very happy kid. Like, things did not make sense. I didn't have any community. My parents, bless them, great people, raised me really well, but they didn't have like that community around them, or like a lot of friends, and like I didn't really have access to that. And I look at like nowadays, like kids here in Eugene that grew up as part of that country fair. Like I was just thinking, like that would have been such a cool way to grow up, because you have this like community built in, and like a sense of purpose, and you're helping out, and like so I didn't have any of that going on. I was just like really confused, and I was watching MTV, which was a real big mistake at the time, because it was making me think that I didn't it was reinforcing the fact that I didn't fit in. Like it was showing me all these people on MTV. I'm like, oh, they look so cool, but I'm not like that, and creating this like divide between me and the cool kids, kind of. And then that would be represented when I would go into class in school and see all these people that didn't look like me, and I felt like we're just like on a whole different level, and I was just like so sensitive and so self-aware and self-conscious, and had a lot of social anxiety. And so I was kind of like really struggling when this spontaneous out of body experience came along. And what it did, which was really amazing for me, is it set me off on starting to research spirituality. Before that point, before I had not cared about it or researched it or I was not interested. I was just into computers, like I was really getting into the World Wide Web and the internet at the time, and was getting into web design, and actually started doing web design professionally around 1996, accidentally, for the company my dad worked for, and that's a whole story. But yeah, the spontaneous out of body like made me go research. I was like, what was this thing? And so it set off this chain of events of learning about spirituality and esoteric concepts, spiritual concepts, learning about lucid dreaming, uh, just all these things that now, a lot of us are into. That was my point of getting into that.
Nice. Well, I want to get back to the kind of the books you were reading, or maybe the spiritual stuff you were ingesting, but I also want to get back to the sound that you heard. You said there was a sound that kind of occurred when you separated. Do you remember sort of what that?
Yeah, it was a lot of static, like loud kind of static, and then kind of a like a, going up in tone kind of sound. But I remember a lot of static, like crinkling of paper kind of sounds really loud in both ears, something like that, and a buzzing, and a feeling that paralysis in my body. Yeah, what was happening?
That's interesting because
Um,
I. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. No.
Well, I was just going to say that I had recently done that interview with Dr. Mary Helen Hensley, and she had a car accident where she was killed. And as she was leaving her body, she heard very specifically this low droning tone. And then
Hmm.
she came to understand that's the frequency that keeps her tethered to Earth, keeps her tethered in a
Oh,
body. And
interesting.
so I thought that was really interesting that you also, and a lot of people have a very specific sound they hear, or something that happens when they have an out of body, or there's definitely a sensory element that, in her case, it was communicating to her, this is the tone that keeps you grounded in an Earth body. And it's a lower
Right.
vibration. But then as we go back home, we're in this such a high vibration that you can't even compare it really to how low you have to get to come to a place like Earth. Um,
Yeah. It all comes back to the sound frequencies. Interesting.
yeah, man, I'm exploring that a lot myself, just kind of getting started with doing a lot of binaural beat stuff and Monroe Institute
Yeah.
tapes, or the Gateway Experience. But I don't want to get into all of my stuff. Let's talk about what you were kind of ingesting after that the out of body experience that sort of helped continue your journey spiritually?
Yeah, so I'm having a hard time thinking of like the specific books that I read, but it was just a general. I think I might have been doing a lot of research online at the time. Like
Okay.
I was probably doing that, and that led me on, down a lot of rabbit holes. Of course, it was still the early days of the web, but there was a good bit out there in like mid to late '90s. Uh, People doing web pages on spiritual concepts and things like that, and so I learned a lot through just different websites. I think before I got a hold of books, and then but I wanted to back up a little bit and get to when I met your brother, Michael, because I met him through, I believe it was through an intro to newspaper and yearbook class. Okay. And that was when I first met him. I wasn't sure about him because he was like, he kind of challenged me in a lot of ways. Because I had so much social anxiety, but he was so direct with me and like would kind of call me out on some of it. Like he would bring it to my attention, like what I was doing, and it was really helpful. Actually, he was a good mirror for me, and got to know him more. Like saw him, regularly every day because we were in the same class, and like he was really interesting and really creative, and I started to bond with him and get to know him, and then we ended up hanging out and like yeah, I just started to become friends from there. But it was initially like I wasn't sure, like he was so different from me in a lot of ways, and his kind of view of how he was looking at life, like the lens that he was looking at was a lot different than mine. um, but we found that common ground, and we both were interested in these expanded states of consciousness. That was one thing that we both shared, and art as well. Art and creativity, expanded states of consciousness, those were kind of the connection points. And that experience of doing that intro to newspaper and yearbook class was hugely important for my professional trajectory, because it sent me into learning about graphic design, learning about web design in the very much the early days of the web, and then also just general visual communications. Like it was what got me through high school. I was in I ended up becoming part of the school newspaper, the Peninsula Outlook, which was a big deal at the time because it had been winning national awards, and everyone felt like we were part of something special, and everyone was bringing their best. And it was a time of like a lot of creativity and meaning. And so I was able to connect with that part of high school. I just stayed really focused on newspaper, being part of that, and then learning about computers, doing self-study graphic design. I was like studying all these graphic design. It's called communication arts. I would just like look through that magazine like endlessly and be inspired and start to develop my design style, which then influenced my web design style, which then allowed me to do the packaging and branding and design for Pure Love Chocolate. And so it all kind of led up to preparing me for doing the chocolate business. And but I had a long stretch of career with web design and doing websites for clients and designing completely custom websites in Photoshop and like doing all this stuff with web technologies. And so now I'm in this point with it where I can draw on all those skills, and it was all thanks to that one class, that intro to newspaper and yearbook, where I also met your brother. So it's cool that it all ties in. That I'm just realizing that now, how it all ties together, that one class.
That's awesome. I know it's incredible how sometimes the smallest event in our life, time wise, or what feels like a trivial thing, like which class you're in, can shape the entire rest of your life. These little events that we just don't give that much meaning or credit to in the moment. It's fascinating to me how much they carry with us. But in terms of my brother, you said you didn't know what to think of him at first. Was he like overly critical with you, or kind of sniped at your weaknesses a few times and kind of put you on guard, or was it something else?
It was more of just like the way he showed up, because I remember him being like, a lot of times he would like wear a lot of black, and like, he just had a darker um way that he showed up, because I think he kind of looked through a lens that's uh, saw a lot of the issues with the world around him and saw the matrix very, very clearly. And so he was seeing a lot of like the problems with the world and the way things were set up and the way high school was set up. And it was really exposed to him. And so that was reflected by like the way he dressed and the music he was into. And it was just it was a harder edge than I was used to. So I was kind of scared of some of the stuff that he was into, to be honest, you know. But it was also really good for me because it exposed me to different perspectives very, you know, earlier on at that point. And and then we ended up having all kinds of great adventures involving cannabis and some other psychedelics, and it was very, very interesting. And back then I had a more complicated relationship with cannabis because it would really bring up my social anxiety, my anxiety in general, my paranoia and fear would come up a lot. Like it wasn't an easy thing. Like I would look around and see like other people my age in school that were experimenting with cannabis and having, you know, great experiences with it, and I would have some and get way too high and then be way too sensitive. I remember being at school stoned after like smoking with someone in a car during lunch or something like that, and like they'd be passing it around, and I would just keep going, and I'd had way too much, and then I'd come into the halls in school and like just be so sensitized to everyone, and just it was just too much. And I remember being in a class and everyone started clapping for something, and I was hearing each individual clap just like amplified, and I was like, whoa, I can't do this. And like so I had to put the relationship with cannabis a little on pause during high school. And other times in my life it's kind of come in cycles, because there's sometimes when it just was not the right medicine for me, but there's other times when it really was and really helped me in a lot of profound ways. I actually credit cannabis for helping me learn how to meditate, because before that I wouldn't meditate. I just didn't get it. I wasn't having much luck with it, but I went through some time with cannabis, like I think when I was living in Olympia, where I would just have some cannabis and then try to meditate, close my eyes, this simple breathing meditation, and I would work through all the thought trains that my mind kept trying to go on. Some of them negative, some of them just far out crazy, like didn't want to go there. I had to keep learning how to bring myself back to center over and over and over again. So I would just like keep going back to center no matter what thought I was having at the time. And that was kind of like my training. And so now I'm able to meditate with or without cannabis very well now, thanks to that kind of practice over and over that I was getting with it. And it would just show me where my mind was straying, and how to bring it back to center over and over again. Yeah,
I've definitely noticed with cannabis too. It's a great teacher, both in positive ways and can be negative when you're not respecting it. Like I've had this happen to me recently. I worked for, as you know, I worked for a cannabis company, working from home, doing customer service for most of the last 3 years. And while my bosses didn't tell me I had to get high, it was certainly encouraged to try the product. I was doing product development. I was sampling all the new strains when we finally started carrying flower. And yeah, I got to the point again where I was not having a really healthy relationship, and it'll bite you sometimes. In my case, I have weird like chest, heart, lung kind of stuff where it feels like, oh no, my heart's gonna do something bad here, and it's probably mostly in my head, but either way, it's a opportunity to step back and examine: is this becoming a crutch or is this a tool?
exactly.
And I think that with a lot of psychedelics, we have to maybe be a little more respectful than once they become legal, we just go nuts and we're all consuming like crazy because it's finally here. I would love to see a more controlled, personally, a little more of like an educational approach and a harm reduction approach to psychedelics, cannabis, because they are powerful teachers, but they're powerful teachers. So we got to be careful.
Yeah, well said. And I always come back to thinking of everything as a relationship. So we're having a relationship with cannabis, we're having a relationship with these different psychedelic molecules and plant medicines, and you have to use them successfully, work with them successfully. You have to always be monitoring what is the relationship here, just like you would with a person. And so if the relationship starts to get kind of unhealthy, codependent, you might want to reevaluate that and step back and see if maybe I'm using this as a crutch, or I'm using this gratuitously or just out of habit, versus am I using this as a powerful tool that it is, and going into it with intention. And that, so some people take that too far though in the other direction, and then they actually are, I mean, because I do feel like there is a place for having fun on
Hmm.
with these tools, because if you do it right, you can have a really fun experience that's also insightful, deep. It's like multifaceted experience that you're having with a psychedelic or with cannabis, where you're learning things, you're having fun and enjoying life, which contributes to the gratitude for living, which gets you out of ruts and out of depression. So like it's doesn't need to be this thing where it's not fun because it's so serious, but then it also, it's a balance. There's a middle way with it, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, I feel that on a deep level too. That everything is about kind of centering back to finding that middle point, but also we're here to have fun. We're here to create. We're here to enjoy our lives. And there's a certain point where you're right. If you think about things in your head too much, well, this has to be all these things. It has to teach me all these lessons. What if that's not really what you're ready for or need at that time? Our ego tells us all these things that we need or that have to happen. And I think sometimes what's great about psychedelics or cannabis is it can bring us back to, you really don't need all that stuff. You're creating scenarios in your head, but this is also an opportunity just to live in the moment and enjoy your creative power. And yeah, I mean, socially, cannabis has been a massive part of my ability to relate to people and also to break down barriers. And especially with my wife and I, we've had some of our biggest breakthroughs on cannabis. And so I could take these negative experiences that have happened more recently and go, oh, it's bad. I need to throw it all out. It's clearly negative for me. Or I can just say, well, maybe there's a balance to be had here instead of, slamming 3 or 4 grams in the volcano every day, which I don't recommend, but I don't judge you either if you're one of those who's hitting dabs. And I mean, some people that works for them. It's just like somebody can smoke all their life, never have lung cancer, and somebody
Yeah.
can never smoke and have lung cancer. I mean, who knows?
It's part of
We're
the
not here to
mystery. Yeah.
seriously.
Yeah. We're not here to judge, right? We're here to just accept people where they're at, as long as they're not doing harm to someone else. And uh, I, yeah, I agree so much with that. What was I going to say? I forgot my thought train there.
That's all right, man. I tend to derail that pretty quickly, but um, I do kind of want to talk more about your experiences though, going from uh, Key Peninsula to Olympia, and sort of, you said there was a lot of shadow work that happened there,
Yeah.
but you
Yes.
also had met a lot of people that were kind of in your same vibe tribe, right? Or people that you,
I had started to meet people that were definitely in my vibe tribe, and I like that term, vibe tribe. Yeah, it's also funny.
I don't know, I'm sure I didn't coin that, but it just felt
Yeah,
natural.
yeah, totally. Uh, so when I first moved to Olympia, I was just like entranced by it. It was so magical. I was like, "What is this place? I love this. This is amazing," and was just very enamored with it. And I moved in with my friend who I started or my lover at the time, friend and lover at the time, and we were ended up being together romantically for like 7.5 years. So we really got to know each other. Spent a lot of time. We're with each other like 24/7 for a long time. Starting that chocolate business was just intense. Like it was just the two of us working on it, and it started growing faster than we could handle. And so we created a lot of stress in a lot of ways, and I gave up a big chunk of my life to start that business with her, and her as well, a big chunk of her life. but now I mean, the way it turned out, it's been really great because now we have this business that's been, we can keep it rolling and it's all established and everything. But at the time, it was just so much work and so stressful, and it brought up a lot of my worst attributes, and I had to deal and have light shown and things reflected. She helped reflect things for me that were problems in myself that were unaddressed. And so it was the conditions that were created by that time in my life, but also the energetics of Olympia, which are very deep and watery energy. And, Olympia gets the most rainfall and clouds of anywhere in Washington and probably in a lot of places. It gets socked in and it stays darker and rainier than most places. And so those conditions can definitely facilitate a lot of shadow work. And that's what I did there. And I feel like I couldn't have done it anywhere else. So 5 years of being in Olympia, the very beginning was very, great and fun and enjoyable. But then the work started like maybe a half a year in, something like that. And it was funny because Lydia and I, we discovered Eugene like 24 middle summer of 2014. We went on a trip to Eugene and we just fell in love with it. And we're like, we came back to Olympia and told everyone, we're moving to Eugene. We're gonna, we found our place. This is, we love this place. And we kind of jumped the gun because it took us 4.5 years to figure out how to move to Eugene. And so it's just kind of like ongoing journey to try to get out of Olympia and to Eugene, to Oregon, because what I realized and what we both realized was there's a lot of differences between Washington and Oregon. Not to say anything bad about, people who love Washington, but just for us, the feeling of being in Oregon was a lot different than the feeling of being in Washington. Like you would cross the border and into Oregon and things just felt different. And I was like, what is this? And so it taught me a lot about like the energetics of place and how the land feels and how the people in the collective vibe make things feel. And so it was very interesting. And that shadow work though that I did, it was a great place to do transformation. Like, and people that are living in Olympia still now, there's a lot of people in that vibe tribe that I know that are still there doing a lot of transformation work, doing a lot of healing. It's a great place for that. Whereas I felt Eugene, you could still do some transformation in Eugene, maybe not at the rate that you could do it in Olympia. It's more celebratory aspect that I feel here, and a little more celebratory in Eugene. These are generalizations though, and this is my experience. So people listening to this that live in Olympia or Eugene that are like, that's not my experience. This is just my experience, my perception of the two places and the contrast. And we did a lot of trips back and forth, so we could really feel that difference and that contrast by going between the two places. And once I finally landed here in Eugene, I was just so relieved and so excited to have escaped this kind of situation that I was in Olympia, where, I mean, part of it was I was living in a really old, funky house with kind of a weird roommate that lived upstairs. That was kind of this overarching weird vibe above us, and like the neighborhood we lived in was weird. It was like weird on top of weird on top of weird, just in the vibes. And so getting to Eugene was a big relief, and I look forward to going back and visiting Olympia because it is a really great place to visit. It's got a lot of magic, but living there for me was pretty difficult, but also very productive. So I don't regret any of it. It's one of those things where you look back at it and you can just see why you were there and why it unfolded like that and why you went through those difficult things.
Yeah, I was just about to say, like, that seems like a great segue for when we're faced with the most difficult situations, that in the time we're in them, we just really don't want to be going through it because it's painful and difficult. Without those, we really don't become the people that we end up becoming because of the growth we experience. And there's a plane going overhead, if you can hear that. I'm right by the airport, so I need to build a soundproof bunker for the podcast here, because unfortunately it's either
There you go.
the couple Dodge Chargers in the neighborhood that like to use the road in front of my house as a drag strip or whatever. But that's neither here nor there.
The cool thing about having random sounds enter a podcast, I've noticed, is that they can happen at synchronistic moments. And so that can actually add to the podcast if you look at it that way.
There you go. Well, it adds color. It makes it feel more real, right? We're not
Right.
now. We're probably not AI bots. Which, if we were AI bots, this would be or at least I'll speak for myself. There would be some programming still needed to be done. But getting back to you know, the experience you went through in Olympia really sounds like you wouldn't trade it for anything, even though it was really tough.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really hard thing for us to internalize, that in our darkest struggles, we're creating the most potential for positive outcomes that we wouldn't really be able to if we were stuck in this comfort all the time. Because that's what we were doing, I guess, back home, right? Before we even came to Earth. And this is of course, my take, that our spirits were just chilling with Source. There was no pain or need for growth. But then we came here because there's a whole new reality we can create. And in that reality, if you just brought home here and we only had goodness, would we even learn anything new, or would it be any different than home? So I think it's cool to hear stories like yours, how you can take negative and explain that this was actually critical to me becoming who I am now. And I hope that gives people some hope who are going through some real shit at the moment and need a little encouragement.
Absolutely. And it's the more reminders you can have to use as tools during those difficult moments, the better. And so the more people that give those reminders, like you're giving a reminder here, like they come from different places, having a kind of like a toolkit of like things to remember when you're going through a difficult experience to kind of help give you some perspective. It's not to take away from how difficult the experience is, but it's just something to kind of help get you back on the rails a little bit so that you don't feel completely like you're just spinning off into the void and that there's a sense of purpose here. And what helps me personally is my framework of looking at the world is that this is indeed Earth's school, and this is where the action is. And the spirit realm is great, and being with Source is amazing and wonderful, and I can't wait to go back there. But I also am very grateful to be in a human body at this time on this planet, to be the age I am. I'm 43. So I've been able to have enough life experience to work through a lot of my shadow material, to understand myself, to know what I need in relationships and all of that good stuff. And now I get to kind of be I feel like I'm kind of at cruising altitude in my life. Like, yeah, there's still difficult days sometimes, there's difficult experiences that come up, but generally day to day I'm cruising, like things are pretty groovy for me. And it was not always that way for sure. So I feel very grateful to be where I'm at in my life. And then I'm also just grateful to be on the planet in a body, even though these bodies are super limiting compared to what we truly are. It's the challenge of working with that. And then it's also the contrast of like having something to bump against, to learn, to grow, to force us to grow, to continually be growing and not be stagnant. I've heard, I've read a lot of the material of like past, or not past life regression, but in between life regression. It's called Journey of Souls, that book. And there's another one that follows it up. And I find it really interesting. Some of those accounts, it resonated a lot that, this is Earth School. Prior to this incarnation, there's kind of this co-creative, collaborative process where we set the trajectory of our life in general. I don't know that we set every little detail. It's like we set kind of a general trajectory for maybe where we're going to be geographically and our parents and like that sort of thing, to set up certain lessons to grow through. And we consciously choose that with the help of like an advisor of some sort, a guide of some sort that we work with. And so it's very much a collaborative co-creation that we're working on to come to Earth School and learn these things and have these interactions and gain these different perspectives and experiences that we then get to bring back to Source as a new perspective. And so that's just like constantly growing with all these individual perspectives is really beautiful when I think about it that way and consider that. And of course, this is just a conceptual framework. There's no way to prove it, like with any of the stuff. So it's only if it resonates for you or not. But that's really helped me to kind of look at the world that way. And it can be a difficult perspective because people are like, well, what about these people that are going through these horrific things? Like you're saying they chose that. I'm like, I don't know. I don't know someone's journey. So you can't say what someone's journey is and why they're going through something. But as far as for my own personal experience, I do believe that I chose certain things to set up the at least the trajectory of my life, and then it's kind of up to me how I navigate that. And there is a lot of danger that you can fall off and get distracted by something, or like lose yourself in a relationship where you become codependent and forget who you are. And like there's all kinds of things that can happen where you get trapped in the illusion or the maya, of this uh, physical reality. But I do think that we have a lot of help if we ask for it. A lot of like help that's interdimensional. If you think of like angels or spirit guides or whatever, those sorts of things, or just connecting directly to source. I think that help is also available. It's just a matter of how do you want to connect. Do you want to go through something that you want to go through your higher self? Do you want to go direct to source? Do you want to go through a spirit guide or an angel? I think there's like kind of different ways you can receive that support.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you that kind of on your journey, what was sort of the what was kind of the differentiation between where you felt like you were asking for help and sort of reaching out and saying, "Give me answers," and where you kind of went inward and found maybe some of your own power too within that? Maybe, give me like a rough breakdown of, you don't have to give me a percentage or something, but just kind of maybe where it sort of one began and the other ended.
Yeah, I think there was a time when I was definitely reaching out for like an angel support, angelic support. I haven't really felt like I have a spirit guide with me. Like some people are like, "Oh, I'm talking with my spirit guides and they're saying this and that." And like I've never really felt that presence. So I don't know that I have a spirit guide, but I know that there's access to angelic support. There's working with your higher self. I think most of the work I've done has been with my higher self. Like that's been the strongest connection that I've felt. And then the higher self is hard to put your finger on of what that is and explain that, but it's a general sense of like excuse me, that your higher self knows everything about you as a soul, everywhere you've been. If you believe in past lives, all of that is your higher self has access to at any given moment, and is that and that's available for you to connect with. It's also that very faint whisper that can help provide guidance if you can listen. And that's why meditation's so great, when you can really quiet your mind to that point where you can hear that faint whisper. um, so I think the most of the work is I've done has been with the higher self. But there was a time when I was listening to all these like angel meditations that this woman had done, and I found them to be really good. Actually, I really felt it. Like I would listen to the angel meditation, I would really feel the connection, and she would be like talking about bringing in all these angels, and I would feel a difference from that, from doing those meditations. Her name is Melanie Beckler, and I found her on YouTube. And yeah, she did some really great angel meditation. I don't do them as much anymore, but for a time that really helped me in my life to like have some extra support that way. And so there's just so many different ways I think to get support energetically from the spirit realm. There's also, working with your ancestors. There's that whole connection, and people that have passed on, like connecting with them. So I think, but we forget so easily that there is help because we get lost in our egos, right? So it's like the ego wants to be like, oh, I've got this all under control. I'm going to figure it out with my mind. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And so we forget to even ask for any kind of support.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point to make it clear that, my podcast is called "You Are the One You Seek," but there's sort of a lot more context to be had there. That meaning you are a fraction of God, so you're not just. It's not going to the ego and saying, I could, like you're saying, I can fix all this myself. I got all the answers. It is about asking for help, but that help that's within yourself, like you're saying, your higher self that is aware outside of time and space of, yeah, all of your journeys. And the way I understand the higher self is it's kind of like the ascendance that you reach in the future, or like once you've gone through all these soul experiences in this linear time frame, then you're outside of time in this form that has now integrated all of those experiences, and you can draw from basically your future enlightenment, which is sort of what the Christ consciousness I think is supposed to be, is this field of energy, that this field of love that is the future of what we achieve just by going through all this, the insanity of Earth School and all the other different realms we inhabit, all the different planets we might get to be on. And I know this is a wild ride for people who aren't accustomed to this kind of stuff, but um, and I can't empirically prove all these things. This is 2-3 years ago. I would have been listening to someone like myself and saying, "Oh, that poor guy's lost the plot. He's off in fairy world. He forgot about science and materialism and all these things." But man, I'm telling you what, near death experience has totally changed the game for me. That was my stepping off point from like the hard material science, coming from ex-Christian to there is nothing beyond what we see in front of us, to, oh, there's a whole, this is the illusion. And you know um,
Everything here is backwards.
even our vision, it's upside down and backwards,
I
right? Comes
know,
in.
isn't that telling right there?
What isn't, and I could be getting this wrong, but is it the left side of your brain controls the right side of your body
Yeah,
and vice
there's that
versa?
crossover. Yeah, that crossover, right?
And again, I think those are clues, right?
Yeah,
Clues that we're in a matrix, we're in a school, that this can't possibly be the real thing, because why would it be so upside down and backwards?
it's so
But
convincing though. It's
yeah,
so real. It's so real seeming.
it is. We did a good job of tricking ourselves for sure.
Yeah, yeah. It's
Now,
just very elaborate.
I know you'd mentioned before that you had come across some of the raw materials back in the day, the Law of One stuff. And
Yeah,
one thing that I found really interesting about that was that Ra talks about, and Ra is basically this collection of energy from a species that existed like what, 2.6 billion years ago or something, on, I think it was Saturn, or it was one of the planets in our galaxy. But that their third dimensional existence, which is the physical, was a lot easier than ours, because maybe that was early on in the universe's energetic life, and there wasn't all these different energies flowing in. So maybe the experiences were a little more almost binary, like you were set in kind of a,
hmm,
a positive mode, and you had a positive experience and a direct connection almost just
hmm.
to source. They said that their veil was very thin, which I found very fascinating. And then you contrast that with Earth, where you have all of this energy coming in at once, and we're here trying to filter through all of these past lives and energies from previous souls experiences. And it feels unfair, but then it kind of makes sense that we progress the most rapidly in an experience like Earth, because we're up against so much. Whereas if you were maybe raw early on, wasn't really as much to learn about the dynamics of what can be, because things were kind of set in this really positive tone. And I don't know, I
Yeah.
found that really interesting. Curious your thoughts on all of
I
that.
I truly believe that where we are right now is the best place for accelerated soul growth. And that if we're just hanging out in the spirit world, or like a vacation planet, I think there's such a thing as like vacation planets. This is definitely not a vacation planet. And so, yeah, if you come to Earth for Earth School, you will be treated with accelerated soul growth. And it's not going to always be easy, but it's a beautiful place. The tortillas are good here, and and I might come back. I don't know if I've been to Earth before. Like, that's one thing that's interesting to think about. Like, have you been to Earth before? Were your previous lives on other planets? Like, there's interesting things there. And then some people are like, oh, I've definitely been to Earth many times, and I'm very familiar with this place. But like, personally, I had to really get used to the third dimension, and like a lot of things with like body awareness, and like a lot of things just didn't make sense here for me. So I don't know. I might have been to Earth before, maybe not. It's all up for speculation, but I do believe that this is definitely a place for accelerated growth, and it's also beautiful in a lot of ways, beautifully horrific in a lot of ways. And there's just so much. It's such a mixed bag coming here, being here, like, and things keep picking up. The pace keeps picking up, and it keeps getting weirder. And I think the key to maintaining a good vibe and being here without wanting to escape or go back home to the spirit world is to to be able to adapt, like being very good at adapting, because the more things pick up and the more things change here with the trajectory we are on as a human civilization, it just seems like if you can adapt quickly and be nimble and not be attached to certain things, then you're going to be able to flow and ride the wave a lot easier than if you're like clinging on to certain aspects of life, or like certain material things, or like you just clinging on to anything. It's like we're really being taught about surrender and detachment with the way things are going here and the way things are picking up.
Yeah, I agree. I think we came here at a very special time. There's a lot of people who believe that we're in this great awakening that's happening now, and that the Earth is actually even on its own ascendance course, or it's about to ascend to a higher dimension or higher density, or however you wanted to describe that. Everyone has different definitions or verbiage, but it does seem like there is a lot of acceleration towards understanding, but at the same time, a lot of darkness. And it feels like that whole it's always the darkest before dawn kind of vibe. And
Yeah, yeah.
well, and I wonder, because you were saying you've wondered if this is your first experience on Earth, or if you've been on Earth before, and that's actually a really interesting thing that Yeshua gets into in the Yeshua channelings, which is that there are Earth souls, there are light workers, and there are star seeds. And the Earth souls are typically souls that have only come to Earth and potentially haven't been here that long. So they're really attached and grounded to Earth life, and a lot of them are laborers, and just really kind of don't think beyond the physical. And there's light workers who apparently were here a long time ago, essentially bringing a bunch of chaos to this plane, that they brought their domination and control and ego to Earth, and that it sort of made Earth such an intense experience. And now light workers are coming back on the Earth to try and fix, essentially, or redirect the negative energy that they brought here. And then there's star seeds, which have lived many lives on other planets, completely as other species, and they just saw this Earth thing and went, "Whoa, that's pretty crazy. I want a slice of that." But
It's
but
where
one
the
of the
action
most
is.
yeah, it's not a vacation world, and we kind of get bored on vacation at a certain point, right? So
Exactly.
it
That's a
makes
good
sense.
metaphor. Yeah.
But I love that you mentioned that, because it's nice to know that there are places we can go to relax too. But I remember Yeshua talking about how light workers and star seeds particularly have more skin conditions, digestive problems, socially are much more awkward. They feel great pain when there's, you know, innocents being harmed in the world, or animals being killed, or warfare, just a great sensitivity. And so I'm always wondering, because I feel like you got to be at least a star seed or a light worker. And there's times where I'm trying to figure out which one I am. And then I'm like, well, maybe I don't need to figure this out. But it does make you think a lot about how we can be so different, not only genetically and culturally, but also on a soul level, where we came from, and how much that could impact the way we live our lives on Earth. But I
Fascinating.
don't have, yeah, I don't have any like conclusion there. It's just something that is in my head all the time, kind of wondering, what am I? And what is, but then that, like you told me this in the past, the law of one can kind of get you into this idea of, because Ra talks a lot about being oriented towards service to self or service to others. And you had mentioned how that can be a really polarizing thing if you can really let your ego grab onto that and say, well, this person is obviously a service to self.
That's what I was doing at the time that I was really into the Law of One raw stuff, is that I guess my ego got involved, and I started to almost get binary with it, where I'm like, oh, this is clearly someone that's service to self oriented, and like just creating a split too much with it, which I think there's definitely some good material there to consider and to integrate. And I think I have integrated a lot of the Law of One stuff. It was so long ago that I was looking into it. Um, but I remember parts of it being kind of like, this is not feeling right, because it's getting too binary, and that must have been the way I was interpreting the teachings. It's usually how it is. It's how the person's interpreting it and applying it, and not
Well,
necessarily the teaching itself.
yeah, one Ra could be, you know, we don't know that these channelings were 100% authentic or accurate,
Yep.
or, and a lot of
Yep.
things that's certainly something that Pamela mentions in the Yeshua channelings. She has a whole section in there about channeling, and specifically says it's subjective. This is coming
That's
through
Yep.
a medium that is biased, and so there's going to be, it's not the inerrant word of God. It is truth being distilled through a filter
Through a
of
filter.
confusion.
Exactly.
So
We have to I believe that we have to remember that with any channeled material, because you can get too into taking it as truth or taking it as 100% fact yeah, everything is coming through filters. If you're in a human body, you are filtering it, and it's being slightly distorted at certain points, and it's just like optics, like it's really hard to get zero distortion with lenses and things like that. Like you have to take that into consideration, that there's always going to be at least a little bit of distortion, even if the channel is so pure and you're so convinced that they're like channeling perfectly. It's like, no, there's still going to be little distortion here and there, and I don't think it can be avoided.
yeah, and I think for me, it's easy to grab onto the addiction of wanting to find truth with a capital T. Growing up a Christian, of course, I wanted to find the answers, and then when I hear something like the Yeshua channelings or read A Course in Miracles or Way of Mastery or the Law of One or all these other channelings and works that were, in my mind, I can't verify that they were actually coming through from a enlightened being. So I am taking it with a grain of salt and some faith, and certainly a bias towards, I want this to be true so bad. But it also resonates in a way that feels a lot more like a remembering than it feels like new knowledge that I didn't know before. It feels almost like, oh yeah, how could I have forgotten that I'm not really this physical thing, and that I'm actually just as divine as the source that created me, truly, and we all are. It's that's, I think, I guess it's what we take away from things, what we filter out as what works for us and what doesn't. And instead of assigning it as it's truth or garbage, we say, well, this is what works for me. And if it doesn't work for you, then that's because it's not on your path for your journey, for your growth and understanding, versus you're an idiot. You don't know what's going on. You're unperceptive. And man, that's been such a challenge for me, because I have such a tendency to pivot back towards that really judgmental, critical, like, let me make this about how I see the way through this, and you clearly are blinded by, or whatever. Very
Yeah,
convicting.
that's a good thing to be checking in yourself consistently, like always making sure that you're not falling into something like that. And that's something I appreciate with you, is your self-awareness. Like you just have this like moment to moment self-awareness of what you're saying, what you're doing, where your ego's getting involved, where it needs to be wrangled, like you just are really seem to be on that. That's something I
I,
appreciate.
well, thanks, man. It's to a fault, because I have a hard time. I look up to you because you are able to, I feel like, live in the moment more. You're not as in your head, and that's something that I'm working towards, is trying to stop needing to assess everything down to the nth degree, and just embrace the good, look for the good, trust that I know inherently where to put love and where to remove judgment and ego. But yeah, so that's what's, and I think that's probably what drew my brother towards you as well, is he could see, oh, this guy's got some light in him that I'm not really seeing in myself. And I think that, it's such a cool example of how we can be on such opposite journeys and yet find each other and work together to solve problems we could never have solved on our own. So it does come
Mm.
back to, like, yeah, we do need help. We do need
Yeah, it's like
we do need
we have it
others.
all. We have it all within. It's paradoxical a little bit. We have it all within ourselves, but then we also need others. It's
A
like,
duality of everything.
and so it's that dance. It's the dance. Yeah, it's all about that dance of self empowerment, but then being open to receiving help from others, offering help, offering service, and just that, yeah, that constant dance. It's really beautiful. Because it'd be boring if we were just like, yeah, we can do everything. We don't need anyone. Like, that's boring. Like, it's more
Yeah.
interesting to see, how do the puzzle pieces connect? Where can we find the common ground? Where can we find the creativity? I personally, I love working collaboratively with people on creative projects. Like, I also enjoy, working solo on certain things, but where the real juice is like, for example, a music jam where we're just making up a song on the spot with some different people. I play harmonica, as you know, like jam style harmonica, and like playing with a guitar player and maybe someone on drums, and like just like where can we let our creativity connect in these like puzzle piece ways, and it's very magical moment to moment, like creating something completely new out of thin air in a jam is like one of my most favorite things. And it also applies to other things than just music. It applies to uh, like an improv skit that you're doing with some people, or applies to like even with graphic design. I've done like collaborative sessions with people where we're designing something like in Illustrator or Photoshop, and it can be so fun if you but you have to let your ego go and just be in the moment with someone, and be open to like moving something here, changing the color there, and like just be in that process, and then you end up coming out with something that's like way more amazing than if I just would have worked on it solo by myself without the other person being part of it.
That's yeah, and I wanted to talk about that for sure. Was your music, your love of music, and also your involvement with doing live recordings and festival recordings. That's something that's a real big part of your life. So I want to hear more about
Oh
kind
yeah.
of the music community that you're a part of in Eugene and other places in Oregon, and your involvement with recording and things like that.
Yeah, so it's starting to really pick up in my life. Back in Olympia, I was involved with some bands back there, and kind of starting out my early journey with concert videos, doing multi-camera concert videos as well as video projected visuals like up behind the band. And what I was doing at the time, I was working with a band called High Ceiling in Olympia, or actually right outside of Olympia, they lived. And it was a time where I was really letting this part of me out in a big way, which was doing the live visuals and the camera work. And so I'd have like a couple of camera operators on each side of the stage, like getting different shots of the band while they're playing, like getting really dynamic close-ups, and then those those cameras would be fed to me with my setup doing the live visuals. And so I'd patch those in and mix them in artistic ways and do these like real-time improvised compositions. So I would have like different video clips I was triggering and mixing in with the live video, and it created this really amazing effect with it projected behind the band. And that was like around 20, I was doing that back in 2012 through like 2015 or something like that, 2016, and was really getting into that. But then it kind of fell off and I forgot about it for a while, and I'm just now getting back into it. And I'm also getting into live streaming of multi-camera concert videos done at a level where there's really good sound. So it'd be like the kind of stuff that people refer to as couch tour, where they're watching like the Nugs or whatever. The Nugs is one that does a lot of like jam bands. They do multi-camera concert videos at pretty high quality. And so like I'm doing that in Eugene now, and I'm working with different bands here and in Oregon. And I'm starting to work with venues, and I realize that's the key for me, is working with venues to do video production, because it's so much equipment to lug around and such a big, with all the cameras and all the gear, tripods and stuff. So I was like, I need to build this into some venues and just work closely with venues. And that's been a big revelation for me. And there's one venue in particular that I'm starting to work with, where I've become friends with one of the co-owner of it, and he's really interested in doing video production. So it's been a really beautiful collaboration with him as we start to lay some infrastructure for doing live stream video and recording. And that's great because you do all the editing live. I'm doing camera switching. I have a headset system, and I'm talking to camera operators about, if there's shots live and how to compose the next shot, if give them a little direction and things like that. And so we're moving toward this like really high quality live video and audio recording and live streaming. And it's been a big journey for me that I've been on since I was a little kid, actually. I've been into video pretty intensely since I was a little kid, like obsessed with video equipment and TV news stations and broadcast equipment and things like that, and researching it probably since I was like, 10 or something like that. Just fascinated by it, working with live video and things like that. And so it's really starting to come into focus in my life more and more. Whereas my career had always been about web design, graphic design, chocolate business, entrepreneurship, that sort of stuff. Now I'm starting to see where the video ties into my life, and how it becomes a community offering, and how it can help support artists and venues, because that's like one of the biggest issues right now is like live music is such an important experience for a community. it's so important and impactful for people, but there's so little financial support for it, and it just not in our society. It's not set up well to support music and musicians and artists and venues, and so much of it's built around alcohol sales, which is a real bummer. And wanting to shift that to a more sustainable way of having a venue. And so with the video production, this is, sorry, I'm kind of going into a long story here, but with the
No,
video
no, go
production,
for it.
my view of it is that this can be something that venues can integrate so that it's beneficial to the venue and the musicians and artists, as well as to the viewers. And so the idea is that people can watch this live stream coming out of this venue, either live or recorded in an archive, and they can be inspired to come down to the physical venue and be in the audience for it, either then while it's happening or in the future. And so we create these live streams for these different venues in Eugene that are coming out of it. And it's called the Elevation Station. That's the name of my project. And it's a community project to create this like arts and music TV network, basically, or TV station that goes around to these different, that is installed basically at these different venues. And there's these really high quality live streams coming out of them. And that then turns into its own venue eventually, where the Elevation Station becomes its own music venue and TV station, where there's like permanently a studio TV camera set up there and all the gear to do this really well, where it's like already set up. We're not having to set it up each time and break it down, which is a big drag. It's just like already there, and it's like a TV station. And that's my dream, is to create the TV station combined with the music venue. And then other community events can happen there, like ecstatic dance and song circles and all these other great things that support communities and empower people to feel more alive and get out of depression and feel connection with others and access their creativity. It's all tied in through this vision for this thing called the Elevation Station, which I realize is a little ways off, because it requires a lot to find like funding. We're probably going to have to like find a warehouse or build something. I don't even know. But right now I'm starting it off very simple at this venue in Eugene called the Hybrid Gallery. And the Hybrid is, it's kind of set up like a listening room. You know, it's a smaller venue. It's not for dancing. It's like for seated shows more. But it's a really great venue, great acoustics, great sound system, and it's really exciting. So that's where I'm starting, is at the Hybrid.
That, I don't want to like overscore this, but seriously, that is, I love that you're doing that. I think that's the future for a world that at least I want to live in, where we're divesting from things being so commercialized, so inaccessible to most people because it's behind, all these restrictions and paywalls. And, we put all this money into building new sports stadiums and dumping billions of dollars into that. And there is a point where sports can unite a lot of people for sure. But
Yeah,
I would
yeah.
argue, that sports has a inherently a more divisive element than music, because it's not usually this band versus this band. It's, hey, let's all collaborate, enjoy, share. And so I would love to see, maybe these are bad things to compare, but I would love to see a shift away from like, that nature in us to be competitive and to be better than the other, and to find ways to connect and grow. And I think stuff like what you're doing is a perfect platform and vision for a future that we need to embrace if we want to really survive, because we can't keep the conflict state of mind going. It's clearly not serving us on a larger scale. But these are, of course, my judgments, my perspectives. But I really, really appreciate that that's something that you're passionate about and pursuing. And I hope that you don't lose that drive,
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate that affirmation or encouragement that I'm on the right track with it, because sometimes I really question it, because it is a lot of work and it is a big vision, and I don't know how it's all going to come together. So I have to keep trusting and surrendering that to just taking the next step, whatever that is. And I keep being reminded every time I go out to live music. I go to a lot of live music in Eugene, as I told you, like different things I'm going to. And I went to something the other night, and it was just like looking around and seeing how the music unifies people is just incredible. Like I went into the venue early, kind of too early. Like I didn't realize the show was going to start later. It was like someone else was on, and the crowd wasn't being respectful to the opener, and it was just like one person playing cello on the loop pedal, and it sounded cool, but they were just, kind of like a younger college crowd, and they were like, people were drinking and being really loud, talking over it, and so I was in the sea of people. It was a sold out show, so it was just like packed in there. I was in the sea of people, and I was just getting so grumpy. I'm like, I don't like any of these people. Like, where am I? This is too loud, and they're talking over the guy that's trying to perform, and getting really annoyed. And then the show started for the band, for the group that I came for, and it started getting really good, and the crowd was quiet. They were paying attention, and I started to see how the music was starting to unify everyone, and everyone was grooving and dancing, and I was looking around, and I'm like, oh, these people are great. It's the effect of the music unifying everyone in the room. I was like, what was I thinking earlier? This is great. I'm glad I'm here. And so just showed me again that power of how music brings people together, and it's so visceral and it's so clear, and I get reminded of it every time that there's a good performance happening, and just that everyone being synced up to how the bass is hitting, and just all of it. It's so powerful and so beautiful, and it's why I love music so much.
Yeah, me too, man. My sob story is that I've been here in Savannah for the last 18, 19 years, and most shows that happen are at a minimum 3 hours away, usually 5 to 6 hours away drive. I have a young family. Uh, both my daughters are in middle school and high school, and so I've just sort of been in this mode of that's not possible for financially, for having to stay overnight somewhere. So I've missed a lot of shows, a lot of bands that I always said I would definitely see before they retired, and keep thinking they're going to retire, and they keep touring in Atlanta or Miami or somewhere that's just too far away, and I'm like, oh.
Just out of
But
reach.
again,
Yeah.
yeah, but it's it's easy to get caught up in that and feel like a victim, or but but that's obviously not right now a big part of my journey, and I can choose to hone in on all the negative aspects, or I can say, well, that's given me more time or resources to explore other things. And but truly, if I'm being honest, if I could trade places with you for a couple months, that wouldn't be the worst thing ever. I still very much would love to experience Oregon again. I've been to Oregon multiple times, and it always did blow me away. Just there was a calm energy about it, and like you said, there's sort of a unifying feel there. And I really do. I can't remember exactly where I've been other than Portland, Bend, and a few other random spots that were up and down the coast, going to either see family or go to a funeral or for a vacation. But yeah, there's something magical about the Northwest that is so different from the South. But for you, your shadow work was Olympia for a few years. I think for me, it's Savannah for much longer. My journey, I think, has required a little more direct dealing with things that maybe have not been dealt with before. Or at least that's how I'm justifying it in my mind, to not feel victimized by life, which is such a theme for me. And I think part of the reason I've stayed so stuck in some ways, because I just see life again happening to me and not for me. And it's really cool to see, again, someone like you kind of be able to clear these hurdles and find a life that's you said is pretty groovy. You're
Yeah.
cruising right now. Things have been
I can
have been pretty solid, and that's no small thing.
Yeah, I can honestly say that I feel that life is groovy for me, and I know it's not everyone's in that place, and so it's just we're in different places at different times, and I feel like the metaphor of us being on a train where there's different cars in the train, instead of this like hierarchical like up and down thing, like where you're climbing something, like you're just moving along from train car to train car, and at the very front of the train where is source, and we're all just kind of moving along, getting a little closer to source. You could say getting closer to what's in alignment with your higher self, whatever that is. And we're just on the train together. We're just being like, hey, I've been through those couple train cars, and yeah, just a little bit ago, and now you're going through them, and I remember that, and and people can be inspired, like, oh, hey, you're down in that train car. I'd love to get over there, and I'm on my way, and I don't know. I just think that that's a kind of a cool metaphor, and we're just
Yeah, that's
yeah. We're just all on the train together. We're just all on the train together. We're going the same place. We're all going to get to the front of the train eventually, and we're just kind of making our way. And people going at different speeds, and there's no judgment about anyone's speed on how they hop to the next train car. It's like all in divine timing. It's all unfolding. You know, there's no there's no mistakes, no regrets. Trying to live that way. I know it's hard. I struggle with regrets all the time, but the more we can live without regrets and just instead look back and be like, oh, that was a good lesson, learn from that, but I don't regret it. You know, I could have maybe done this differently. I like the concept of, you know, after this lifetime, maybe we go to a life review. I thought that was a cool concept where we could play out things in kind of a simulator and see like how could things have gone differently in my life if I would have made this decision, or you know, learning from different ways you could have uh, approached life, and just like, seeing how that might have played out just for
the
learning.
multiverse. Is that what you're referring to here? If we can go and
Yeah, different
refer,
timelines, different trajectories based on choices you make, I guess. But looking at it in a very objective, kind of detached way, and not in a like, oh, you know, hanging on to some sort of regret about like a choice you made back in high school or something. I don't know.
yeah. Well, that's something that you hear a lot in the NDEs. People with their life reviews, they're able to relive moments, but they're able to feel all the emotions and good and bad, how they affected someone else in each scenario. And to me, that
Yeah.
why would you need hell or punishment or whatever when you can actually see the direct impact of your actions, words on everyone around you? To me, that's more terrifying than, well, maybe not more terrifying, but it's almost as terrifying than going
Impact.
to a literal hell. Because yeah, you're seeing, and I, for me, man, it's going to be brutal because of how cynical, negative, and judgmental I was for so many years, thinking that I was somehow using the discernment of God to separate myself from the evil in the world. And all it did was make me see others as less than, or that I need to separate myself from. And
Mm,
the amount of people I hurt along the way, I do regret that very much. But I'm trying to also go back to those places of hurt and say, you know what? You were deeply confused. You were misled. You were running with what you thought was the right thing, and loving and forgiving that part of myself that was so out of balance, because no one else is going to judge me. Source is not here to judge us. Love doesn't tell us exactly how things should be or prescribe exactly what we should do or else. So why am who's really here to judge me? And I guess I come back to, well, it's myself. And I think it will be us who becomes the judge and jury of our own lives when we do leave these bodies. And yeah, obviously it'd be nice to have some of that insight now a little more
yeah.
directly, you know.
Yeah,
But
totally.
that's why I love hearing other people's, you know, NDEs or out of body experiences or anything where they were getting a glimpse of something so far beyond this that it forces us to then question, well, okay, maybe this isn't all there is, and maybe all the pain I'm going through is not actually a punishment, or because it's just happening to me with no possible relief. You know, I think a lot of us see it's just a stream of attacks coming your way with no possible relief, and there's no way to shield yourself or defend yourself. But it's because we
Mm,
identify, I think, with those attacks, and we see ourself in it. That's something that, I'm sorry I'm getting all my crap right now, but Course in Miracles talked a lot about that, how when we attack something in the world, we're attacking that same thing within ourselves because we're seeing it as separate and worthy of judgment. And there is nothing outside of ourselves or outside of God that deserves anything other than love. So,
it's so simple when it comes down to it. It's so simple, but we make it so complex because of our minds and our ego and all of that. And it's so funny when it comes down to it. It's so funny how simple it is. And love is what comes in and smooths over everything. It just comes in and washes over all of it and smooths it all out. And the compassion part. And yeah, it's so simple, but we forget.
yeah, well, I guess again, it wouldn't be a very good game if we remembered everything, had full access to the cheat codes. You know, I do
Yeah.
liken it to my love of video games, that when you're in it and you're immersed, you know, I used to enjoy having the difficulty set really low on a video game so I could just crush it. You know, I just wanted to plow my way through. Now I'm more into like putting it on hardcore or insanity mode where I'm dying a lot more, but I have to really think about my strategy and all the, you know, these,
Mm.
but I also get more immersed in the game the more realistic it feels. And of course, now we have VR glasses and way more immersive technology for video games that do almost create the thing we're creating here, which is this simulation. And to me, it makes perfect sense how, in order for the game to be convincing, we had to create the trick that we thought we were separate from God. We thought we were separate from our true identity so that it feels immersive and compelling. So,
Yeah.
but I also don't think we should reduce it down to just a meaningless game that has no consequence. I think
I
that's something that can be lost in all that too.
I agree completely. Yeah, you can reduce it down too much, and then it loses any of the purpose, and it becomes pretty disturbing if you just sort of like,
Yeah.
this is a simulation. There's no purpose. Like, that's really a dark perspective to me. I mean, I'm not judging people that have that perspective because everyone's at a different part of their journey and their understanding of things, and there's no way to prove any of it. So everyone
Well, when
has
you
a
see
valid.
all the news in the world that's so focused on all the darkness, all the conflict, and then you hear, oh, it's all a simulation. Well, then yeah, it kind of sounds like a nefarious, evil thing. Like what what malevolent deity created this? And then
Right.
the irony is that I think we created it. I think Source gave us the power to create this universe to experience, and so that
Yeah.
to me also takes this thing out of like, who can I really be mad at but myself for choosing to go through this
Because
difficult life?
we get to choose moment to moment how we're going to react to things and how we're going to let exterior things affect us and whether or not we're going to be a victim about it. And we get to choose moment to moment. I mean, that there are harder experiences and more difficult things happening to people than others. And there's all of that. I mean, it's more nuanced, of course, but as far as our thoughts that we're having moment to moment, we do get to choose whether we're going to entertain thoughts that pull us down and spiral us versus are we going to stay more on thoughts that feel more harmonic and more loving and loving to ourselves and others, and staying more in peace. It's like we get to choose that.
What is maybe one of the ways that helps facilitate that for you? Is it ignoring the news? Is it ignoring certain aspects of culture that are resonating with more negativity, or what's kind of your method for
Yeah,
sticking with the positive?
I wouldn't say ignoring the news because I'm open to hearing what the news is. But what I do is, instead of seeking out the news, I think there's a difference between like seeking out the news, ignoring the news, like, because you could just like put your head in the sand and be like, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to know anything that's going on. So that's one end of the spectrum. I don't think I'm at that end of the spectrum, but I'm also not at the end of the spectrum, which is like seeking out the news every day and like, I gotta know, and like getting hooked into that dopamine cycle, which I believe is a huge part of why people keep up on the news. Is there's a dopamine cycle happening there, and that people might get upset at me for saying that, and I do believe some people's purpose in life might be to be tuned into a lot of the news, and they might be activists and they're actively working on change, and so they need to know what's happening. So that's totally valid. But I think there's a lot of people that are hooked into that dopamine cycle where it's addictive for them to go and find out what the news is first thing. They set their day off in this trajectory, which basically I feel like they're sabotaging their day by taking in this news stream that's been curated by someone else that's then telling you what to focus on for the day. And so instead of doing that, I am coming from this perspective of like, I'm totally open to knowing what's going on in the world, but I'm going to let it come to me through word of mouth. So I'm going to have a friend that tells me what's going on that they found out. And so it's a word of mouth kind of news. That's how I receive it. And I'm actually a lot more concerned with what is the news relating to, like, the local area around me, like the community around me. I'm very, I want to know specifics. I want to start by knowing what's the news there, what's important happening in my community, and then out from there. But I let it come through other people if it's important. I kind of let other people filter it, and then I'm like, okay, I'm open to hearing that and talking about that and processing that, but I'm not going to seek it out every day by like watching the news or whatever, reading the news, that sort of thing.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
works
that's a
well for
great
me,
point.
but it's not for everyone. And some people might say, oh, that's avoidant. There's different ways of looking at it. But I know for my own life, That is what works best for me currently, is just hear it through other people.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I am very guilty and a recovering doom scroller, so it's for me about finding new ways to look at things as kind of everything's neutral, and it's what I do with it that makes it either positive or negative. Kind of like you're saying, you can let the news come to you, and even if it's really bad news, it's your choice whether to let that impact you in a negative way or to use that as a agent for change, or here's what I could be doing different to maybe change the news so that this doesn't keep happening. And of course, for me, it's just been about harboring all the guilt of, oh, humanity's so lost, and we're clearly going down this path of destruction. But the more I focus on that, that's all I see in the world. That's all I see in other people. It ruins my ability to find love anywhere or peace anywhere, because I just, again, what you attack and focus on in the world is what you're attacking within yourself and what you're focusing on with yourself.
See that
And
again and again. Yeah, if people could realize that, I think we'd be a much more peaceful world if people could recognize that dynamic as it's happening, as it's playing out, and shift it. Yeah.
yeah, for sure. Well, I know we've gotten really heavy here. I want to get back real quick to tortillas, because we skipped right over tortillas.
Oh, there's so
And
many things to talk about. Yeah.
well, you have you got the Pure Love Chocolate website, purelovechocolate.com, right?
Uh-huh.
And then there's bonbonsnook.com.
Yep, bonbonsnook.com. That's my second food business. It's just in the early stages, but it was inspired by my experience discovering cassava flour and making cassava tortillas. My own recipe that I developed over a number of years. It was due to needing to go off of grains at the time. I was having chronic fatigue and a lot of health issues, and I didn't realize it was triggered by all this bread and toast I was eating every day. I had that programming that, like, oh yeah, you have bread with every meal, or have it every day, and it's like a comfort food thing. I love toast and butter, and I was eating that all the time, and I was like completely fatigued all the time, and I didn't know why. And I finally did, an elimination diet, which I highly recommend anyone that has mysterious health issues, like, do an elimination diet so you can really see and like add foods back in. And then you're like, you add the food back in, you're like, oh, that's the one. Because you go from feeling good when you simplified down all your food to then like finding out like what is the thing that's causing the issues. And so I found out it was bread, it was grains. And I was even having the Ezekiel sprouted bread, and I was having quinoa and rice, and all those things at the time were causing me fatigue. I would like eat them, and then I would notice now I'm tired. So it was like a direct correlation. And so I went off grains completely for a little while, and I was really missing bread and toast and that kind of comfort food experience. And I discovered cassava flour at the time at the Olympia Food Co-op. So it was a food co-op. It just kind of started coming on the market in the US in natural food stores at the time. And I started playing with that and trying out tortilla recipes. And I found out I could eat the tortillas from the cassava flour and not get tired. So I was like, this is amazing. I have my comfort food again, and I was eating tortillas with butter. I was having them for tacos. I was putting different toppings and spreads on them and nut butters and having all kinds of fun with cassava. And so I've been making these tortillas for years. This was probably back in 2015, 2016 when I started making them. And the recipe has been the same for a long time now. I stabilized the recipe. And so I ended up being like, I really want to share this because I was excited about them, and I'm still excited about them. And there's an aspect of having a community thing tied into this. So you have a tortilla party. And I just did this last night, actually. We had a taco party. We did a taco Thursday taco party over at a larger house that a friend owns, and we had a bunch of friends over. And there's something about getting the tortillas going that starts the party. So like I have my tortilla cooker, which is this large crepe maker. I thought I was going to cook crepes, and it turns out I don't like making crepes. I'm not good at it. So I'm like, oh, this is actually, I can cook 4 tortillas at a time. It heats up fast, put it on the counter. So I get the tortillas going. I'm pressing them out. I make the mix up, make the balls, and press them with the tortilla press, flip them onto the tortilla cooker, and then it's heating up. The smells are going into the air, and then like people are bringing different toppings for the tacos, and it just all starts happening. And it's just, I saw it last night, like how it starts the party, and like it's all flowing, and the tortillas are going into the tortilla warmer, and people are coming and getting them and making their tacos, and it's just a whole thing that starts up. So I was reminded of that last night. It was really fun. So yeah, there's an element of community, an element of parties, and an element of health and nutrition that's in this for me with Bonbons Nook. And so I sell a tortilla mix that's a make at home cassava tortilla mix that has some other fibers and other simple ingredients in it. And the only thing about it is that you need to figure out having a tortilla press. And that's kind of the block right now. I'm trying to figure out like how to get around like, okay, people have to commit to this by buying another kitchen gadget with, which is funny because a lot of people are so resistant to another kitchen thing. They're like, oh, I don't have room in my kitchen for a tortilla press, or oh, that's too heavy or whatever. But if people get
They're
a
really
tortilla,
compact.
they are really compact. It's a psychological barrier. So you got a tortilla press, you ended up making tortillas for your family, and it went great. And so if people
Hmm.
have a tortilla press, they can buy this mix from bonbonsnook.com. And it's also available locally here in Eugene at Sundance Natural Foods. And I have a savory version and a cinnamon sweet version. So there's the dessert tortillas and then the savory tortillas for like tacos. And I have those two products. And yeah, I'm just starting out with it. Like the chocolate business has really been the thing that's taken over my life in a lot of ways. So that's the priority. But this is my next thing, and just putting energy into it where I can. And it's really fun as a kind of an art project. Like I did all the branding and packaging design, and I've had a ton of fun with it so far. And when I've done samplings, demos at Sundance and different places, at parties, at dances, like people have really responded well to the tortillas, and it's a unique thing for people. They haven't really. There are the cassava tortillas you can get in the store that are like the prepackaged, refrigerated or frozen ones, and that's one thing. But it's something different when you're making them fresh on your own and you're cooking them up fresh. It's like a different experience. So I'm really excited to share them with people.
Yeah, yeah, it's a lot of fun, man. I love that creates sort of a community party atmosphere, like you're saying. And I mean, tacos are always one of nature's most binding elements, right? Um, maybe not nature's, one of humans' culinary most binding efforts. We all love to get together to eat tacos, and yeah, your tortillas are really hearty. They're really, they have a good taste to them. You don't have to add a bunch of seasoning or whatever. My daughters liked them, which is the real barometer of,
Oh, that's great.
are these universally pretty uh, applicable to everybody or enjoyable to everyone? And yeah, they're really really good. I know that's not something that you're, like you said, the chocolate business is kind of the main thing, but I love that you have that going too, and I certainly would love to see you be able to expand that in some way. But you got the music studio, you got a little I should say you have a lot of different fires in the oven, so I know that there's probably that tendency to not to want to overextend yourself and wear
Yes,
yourself out.
that's been a big part of my journey is being honest about the amount of energy I have to spread out to these different projects. And it can be overwhelming at times because I do have so many things going on. But what I found is that life will continue to bring me back and kind of circle me through these different things if I just follow where is the inspiration for today? Like, what is the inspiration for this moment down to that level, What it, and then if I follow that, it seems to work out that everything gets some energy and I keep coming back to these different projects. And if it's been too long and I haven't come back to a project, it's probably time to let it go. That's that kind of thing. That's kind of how I do it.
Yeah,
So,
gotcha. And
yeah,
continue.
I don't know what I was going to say. You go.
Okay. Well, I also flew right past the podcast. I've mentioned Bonbons Nook, but I didn't mention that you have Bonbons Nook, the podcast, which
Yeah, which is loosely connected to the Tortilla brand. It shares the same name and website, bonbonsnook.com/podcast is the way to get to it. And then if you search on Spotify, it's the Bonbons Nook podcast. And you were one of my first guests on there. And we're going to do another episode, part 2, follow up, which I'm really looking
hell
forward
yeah.
to. Yeah. And the podcast has been this thing that's kind of come out of nowhere. I mean, I've always been into broadcasting and that sort of thing, but I wasn't quite sure I was going to do a podcast until recently. I had been a podcast consumer and still am for many years. I've been listening to them, and they got me through some of my darkest days in Olympia. Actually, of feeling lonely and caught in a rut and a routine that was just so mundane. But then I would listen to these podcasts on my walks, and it would be like having these virtual friends that I would be following and keeping up with, and listen to these really inspiring conversations and hearing these different perspectives. And it would affirm certain things that I was already thinking and expand on them. It's so magical when you find the right podcast with the people that you vibe with. It's just incredibly helpful. So I wanted to provide that for other people, and also personally have these experiences of creating a podcast container for my own podcast, and then having people on and getting to learn more about the people I already know and learn about new people and make friends and connections. It just, having a podcast feels very connective in a lot of really positive ways. And it's so simple and easy to do. It's just a matter of committing and being like, I have a podcast now. I'm going to keep putting out episodes. I'm not going to just put out 4 episodes and stop like you see at some podcasts that drop off. Like, I've got 8 episodes out now, and I have no intention of stopping anytime soon. Like, I'll probably go over 100 or get into the hundreds at some point. I feel like I'm going to do it the rest of my life. It's that kind of commitment that I've made to this podcast that I'm doing. And it's really fun.
Yeah, I love it, man, because it's not nearly as maybe agenda oriented as even mine or some other people's, where I'm trying to kind of deal with almost a very specific topic in a broad sort of way. But
Yeah.
you have conversations with people, and it's just a free flowing experience where you're really, after the heart of what makes someone tick. You're not trying to get, it's not a bunch of gotcha questions or hardline journalism. It's just a fluid exchange, as we
A
like to
fluid
say.
exchange. Yeah, I loved that description of our conversations. It's really funny. So I think there's definitely a place for different types of podcasts, and some of them are more topic oriented, and you could say have an agenda, but just more topical, where it's a little more focused, and there's some rails there. There's some rails up for like where the conversations go. And then there's other podcasts which have primarily been the ones I've consumed personally that I've gotten the most out of, which has been the organic conversation style podcasts, which people could criticize and be like, "Oh, what's your podcast about?" "Oh, nothing," kind of like Seinfeld or something. Uh, but what I found with the organic conversations that have no agenda other than let's just see where the conversation goes and flows, and maybe you have some questions that you're kind of have in mind that you want to ask the person, but it's not orchestrated or planned out. I feel like those kind of podcasts have their own magic, because you could get into conversational territory that you normally wouldn't get into if it was more where you had an agenda for it. And I do think that there's not one that's better than the other. It's just different flavors, and people are going to be attracted to different types of podcasts. Some people might want to be more focused in on a topic, and like for yours, for example, I think you have a nice balance between the organic conversation ability that it could go, that possibility that could go in that, but then also having these kind of intentions for the type of topics you want to cover, like NDEs with the near-death experiences, these consciousness, like some spiritual concepts, like all these different things that you kind of want to focus on with people. I think is great. And so you have a nice balance going on, whereas mine is like very open, and I really don't. I mean, if there was going to be some topics I would cover, it's like general, like with music and creativity and things like that, and what people are inspired by. But I really just, my only criteria for having people on the Bon Bon Stick podcast is, do I find them interesting in some way? And that's it.
Well, you really, for not having an agenda, I think your questions flow really well. The conversations don't come off as awkward or like, oh, where are they going here? It feels very much like, and I listened to the one recently with Haley. Is it Loren or
Yeah,
how do you
Haley
say her name?
Loren. Yeah.
Okay, and that was just, I felt like I was sitting in the room with you too, and
Nice.
there was something about it that felt more intimate than, I guess, like you're saying, kind of a podcast where you can tell it was really scripted, planned out. They had all these agenda points, and yeah, it's refreshing. And like you said, there's something for everyone out there. It's not about doing it the right way,
Exactly.
and there's other ways wrong. It's just about all the different colors and flavors being available for us to choose from. But I just wanted to say that specifically, I really appreciate what you're doing with yours and just the nature of having that open conversation and not needing it to be necessarily going any certain direction.
Yeah,
So keep that up, man.
thank you, man. I appreciate that. And one other thing I wanted to add about the podcast is that now that I've done my own and, done 8 episodes and counting, I've figured out the technology and the sound part and also some of the art of it where I can now comfortably help people that want to start their own podcast. And that's another passion of mine, is helping people get a podcast going that have always been thinking about it, but have felt like mental blocks about it, or other blocks that they have where they're not starting it yet. I can work with them to help get them through that. And that's another part of my work in the world, is one-on-one tech consulting, training, web support. That's what I do through my business, Starchild Creative Services, which is starchildcreative.com. If anyone is interested in working with me, that's another aspect of what I do, is the one-on-one support and tech consulting, things like that.
Well, I don't think my podcast would be here without you and your encouragement and your help getting some of the initial stuff out of the way. So truly, I am very grateful to you for me even having the fortitude to finally do this. I had been agonizing about it for months as well and didn't know if I had anything worth contributing, but you gave me a lot of encouragement that, no, man, you have some interesting thoughts and something that maybe people can grab onto, and a few people out there can maybe get a little out of it and get some hope out of it. But that's all I'm really after too. I just hope that there's a small audience that can gravitate towards the hopeful message and, filter out all the ego and nonsense that comes through, because I'm still really early on my spiritual awakening and discovery process. It's only been a recent discovery for me. So there's still a lot of that old nasty ego and judgment creeping back in, trying to come out. And it's going to come out, I'm sure, in the podcast or in interviews. I'm going to still be working through stuff, but
it's beautiful. It's all a part of the process, and people are going to be able to follow along with you and be able to relate to what they're going through in their journey. And I think it's beautiful, and you're off to a really wonderful start. And it's been an honor to be part of the process with helping, suggest things and helping, just giving support so that you could get going. And I'm really excited to see where you go with this podcast. And I think that your audience might start out small, but I think the numbers are going to be growing as more and more people get interested in these ideas. And I think it's going to be very resonant and relevant to a lot of people. So
love what you're doing. I appreciate that a lot, man. That means a ton. And I obviously don't want to continue to take the rest of your day up. You've given me a gracious 2 hours here. So
I got time. I mean, if we want to talk about anything else, I'm here for it.
I don't want to be disrespectful of your time. Well, let me back it up, then I can edit that whole little blurb out and just say,
oh, you could keep it. It's fine. Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, true. I know. I get too wigged out about letting my humanity show. It's the ego trying to keep me sounding more put together than I actually am. But that's something I have to let go of too. Is just be me.
One thing I've noticed that I really enjoy on podcasts is when people are saying something like, oh, maybe we should edit that out, but they leave it in. It's kind of like, it gives you a little bit of makes it more real and more authentic sometimes. I mean, there's a balance there. Sometimes you
agree with you.
Out.
No, you're right. There's been many times where I've heard that, and I'm like, oh, I'm so glad they didn't edit that out. That's so funny. It's
Isn't that funny? Yeah, how that works.
Relatable and human. So yeah, you're right. I need to be less afraid of. Again, there's so much calcification of how I view myself as this. I noticed too with my dreams. I constantly have dreams where I'm in a social setting. It seems like it's always school or something that feels like school, and it's always this large group of people, and I've got like some that really like me, and there's always the one like bully who is out to tear down everything that I care about, even though I don't feel like asserting myself too dominantly in these dreams. And so there's this constant pull of trying to make people around me feel a certain way about me. And I'm wondering if I keep having these dreams because that's something that I have to just keep letting go of, is this expectation of how others are going to perceive me. And it really colors how you act, because then if you're acting under the guise of, well, I can only be this way so that they perceive me a certain way, you're not being authentic, and people see through that. And then they're not really drawn to you because they see that inauthenticity. So I don't know where I'm going with that other than that it's going to be a long process for me to allow stuff like a mistake and not edit it out and just let it be in the moment and say, that's just who you are, David. That's part of your journey and it's okay. It might be a little messy to some people, but there's an endearing quality to being honest and not trying to mask every imperfection. So I appreciate you encouraging me to run with that a little more and not be so, you know, edit crazy, because radio broadcasting school taught me to present yourself in a very specific way. And if you don't do it, if you don't, you know, and I do it all the time. I say, like I just did, or like, or. There's all these things that I'm always thinking about, the broadcaster brain. Like you have to communicate clearly. But if I focus so much on semantics and getting the right words down, that comes across again as scripted, a little phony, a little disingenuous. So yeah, I'm finding that balance, and
Yeah, it's
your
beautiful.
feedback and encouragement have really helped with that.
Oh, that's great to hear. Yeah, it is such a balance because we don't want to turn into something that is like sounds like AI generated podcast characters where there's like, there's ways you can like remove all the pauses and just like tighten it all up. And like when I listen to that stuff, I'm like, I do not like this. Like maybe I'm saving time by hearing the pauses taken out. Like a lot of YouTubers will do that, and I'm just like, God, this sounds so unnatural. Like I want to have some moments to like take the information in moment to moment and have those natural pauses of someone talking without the pauses removed. It's just, so it's all a balance though.
Yeah. Well, you have a certain flow to your communication that works well with not having to over edit, but I'm constantly trying to think of the next word correctly, and then I
Oh, I
pause
see.
and talk in a. I kind of come across robotic in my ability to just get a thought out. So sometimes I have to squeeze stuff together so it doesn't sound so damn blocky. But I know what you mean. Where maybe I've had a profound thought, and instead of just jumping right into the next thought, give it a little air, give it a little time to breathe and think
Yeah.
about what I just said. And yeah, I don't know why I'm trying to get you to help me solve my downfalls to
Well,
podcasting here.
I don't think you're trying to get me to solve anything. You're just you're voicing some of the things you're working with. And so by voicing them to me and to the audience here, it's just helping you on your journey.
Yeah, true. Well, in Dr. Mary Helen Hensley, who I had on, and I guess I'm uploading that one on March 13th.
I'm excited for that one.
Which,
Yeah.
yeah, she really. Oh crap! I just lost my. I just forgot the point I was going to make. Wait, were you talking about? Oh, see, this is a classic moment where I definitely
It's okay.
can't keep it in. Oh crap! I completely forgot. We were just talking about it. Refresh my memory. And you're probably on a different train of thought. So you're like, "What are you talking about?" I can't. Damn it! I totally lost the point that she had made about. Well, you know what? Let's just forget it, man, because I'm gonna completely forget it and get hung up on it for
It's
5 minutes
okay.
trying to.
That's one of those things. That's part of the surrender is like if you quickly recovering from like a lost thought and just letting it go and trusting it'll come back if it needs to be covered.
If it was
Yeah.
important, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
maybe it was
Yeah.
meant to be out of my mind, but no, she did. She had a lot of good points that challenged me that I definitely hadn't really considered, and possibly I was like, oh no, do I need to do like a postscript on this to say, well, just in case you were taking what she said the wrong way. But I love that she was boldly talking about, she talked about suicide in a way that I had never heard. That was kind of jarring to me at first, but then the more she talked about it, the more it seemed like, okay, this was actually a really helpful perspective on it. And I got into it later, but yeah, it's going to drive me crazy now that I can't remember the whole point I was trying to make with what she was saying to me. But okay, thank goodness. So, A Course in Miracles talks a lot about this, and she mentioned it as well, that as you teach, you learn. And so she said, you're doing this podcast because you're trying to heal. We can all see it. She's like, we can all see what's happening here. You're doing the podcast because you're finding your healing through telling others about that process. And that was something, and again, in Course in Miracles, is as you teach, you learn. And I thought, well, that's really interesting, because often I don't like it when someone comes across like they don't really know what they're talking about and they're trying to teach me. But when it's from the heart and you're gravitating towards finding new ways to love and accept people, the more you teach how to do that, the more you learn yourself how to attach love to situations you used to attach pain and ego and division and separation. So that was something that really stood out to me and is so glaring with my podcast. Is clearly I'm saying I still need help. I haven't figured it all out, but I want so badly for other people to feel this love that I've just been recently introduced to that has completely transformed my perspective. And that, I mean, I
That's
spent probably 6 months weeping, listening to meditation tones and certain frequencies. There's a couple artists I found on YouTube that were very minimal ambient stuff that just unlocked these these parts of me that were so calcified. And I just remember weeping for a good 6 months. I cried very, very often. And that was something that I had not done in a really long time. And I just felt the love pouring in and so much of the judgment melting away. But so that's, I guess I'm just still evangelical, even if I'm not a Christian anymore, about wanting to spread love everywhere I can.
and I think that
And
comes from
especially
a
now,
yeah, that comes from a good place, wanting to spread that these things that had such a impact on you, and that's such a beautiful experience like you were talking about over the last 6 months, that you can be so authentic and so real with people, and that's so refreshing that you're not like putting yourself elevating yourself up as like I'm your teacher, and like and the whole I think the whole teaching as you're learning kind of dynamic works well if it's coming from a truly heart place instead of a mental place of like I know what's best for you, I know more than you. It's like no, I'm actually learning along with you, and I'm going through my own journey, and I might be more involved in these certain ways and you might be more involved in these other ways, and like we're all just learning together and teaching each other things. And by creating a podcast, you're creating a platform that you can relay your direct experience to inspire others. And then if they feel they have something they want to teach others, they can create their own podcast and relay that through their podcast. And it's a very much an equal playing field that way. If you look at it in that sense, where right now we're in this golden time of anyone can easily create their own podcast. That's amazing. Now, a matter of if they stick with that and if people actually listen to it is another thing. But I think as long as you stick with something and commit to it and keep doing it when it comes to podcasts anyway, it will be successful. You will have an impact. There will be people that hear it, even if it's not a huge audience. You'll still be impacting people in a positive way.
that's what I'm hoping. I know that that was another thing I've taken away from the Yeshua channelings is we're only here to really truly awaken to our own light, and we're not here to save everyone else around us. That when we awaken to our own light, we basically radiate it outwards and people are just naturally drawn to it, but we're not necessarily here to save the world. But at the same time, there's that part of me that's like, well, but I know I can't save anyone else, but if I can give them a relatable story about some of the really dark shit that I've been through and how I was able to transmute that into this newfound love energy, that'll be worth it, even if, again, like you said, it's a small audience or only a handful of people, because that's what inspired me, was hearing other people's stories of breakthrough and transformation. And while I didn't physically die, I came pretty damn close to ending it. And physically, I was at the bottom of my health and having just chronic, crazy issues going on. So, I mean, it was almost like I had my near death the easy way. I didn't actually have to die. I didn't have the direct revelation from my higher self, from my guides, which I still crave some of that. I still crave a more direct communication. But I think for me specifically, a big part of my journey is to have to navigate that more manually and draw inspiration from other people's stories. And so I just kind of want to be another one of those people that I found along the way that was inspiring and gave me the energy to even want to put this message out there. And like you said, hopefully it's a circular thing where more and more people will want to find that within themselves and then broadcast that outward with no expectation back. You may not get anything back positive, but again, we're not here to necessarily save everyone else. We're here to discover our own light. And I think that just by nature of doing that, we bring the people around us back into that understanding on their own journey. But it potentially can shorten the time of their awakening. But
Yeah,
then
beautiful
Go
intentions
ahead.
for what you're such beautiful intentions for what you're doing with this. And I think there's an important word differentiation between feeling like you need to save people and feeling like you want to inspire people. I think that saving versus inspiring is handles it right there. Like if you shift into more of the I'm wanting to inspire people.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely. And on that note, man, you've been a very, very inspiring person to me just by nature of, again, embracing who you are, not trying to, what feels like to me, not trying to conform yourself to all these restrictions that society places on us. And I think, the more that we see individuals like you out there just living their truth and not fearing how they're going to be perceived within reason. I mean, I know you're still a human being and you're still going to have those feelings of validation and all that, but the more you embrace that, the more you're able to run with it. And I have a couple other living examples in my life of people who are just, they came from so much difficulty and religious upbringings and all these things that told them exactly who they were, and had the courage to say, you know what, that didn't ever resonate for me. I need to explore what's outside of this. And that takes a lot of guts and a lot of losing the fear of disappointing your family, your parents, your pastors, your teachers. I mean, there's all these people I had to really let go of the concern of what's my impact going to be if I tell them I don't believe this anymore. And man, it's so liberating though when you finally take that step and really go on the path of self discovery and learning what is truly important and resonant to you. And I believe that every single one of us who does that and asks ourselves the questions like, what's within me, what's good within me, you'll get the answers, and it may take some time, but you're going to find that light. It just doesn't always look like we're talking about the same trajectory or the same speed. But and I'm sermonizing at this point, but I really appreciate that you're kind of picking up what I'm putting down,
Oh,
and
I'm
I hope
picking it
that
up, brother. Yeah, for
well,
sure.
I do have to be careful because there is a part in my mind where I have to put guardrails up and say, don't let feedback, either positive or negative, really sway my
Mm.
direction. Other than being, I want to be receptive to people who are like, no, you're really causing a lot of harm here with saying this. I want to have an open heart, but I also don't want to be so tossed around by opinions that I lose my way. And that's in my relationship with my wife, my relationship with coworkers and friends. That's been the case where I'm so concerned about their perception on me that it if it's bad, or if I catch wind that they don't like me or I've done something that's upset them, it shatters my own view of myself. And that's so destructive to place our hopes, fears, and well-being in the hands of people that are on their own journeys, on their own paths, and we can't really entrust, that too. We really have to entrust it to ourselves, and but while still being able to be in community with these people and give them love and be open to their journey and path. So yeah, it's duality of all things, the balance. It's very, very difficult. But I think, like you said, it's really so simple. You were saying this earlier. It really is so simple, and we overcomplicate it so much. But it really is just. I mean, freaking John Lennon made it as simple as you could make it. All you need is love, and everyone goes back to that and says, "Well, that's the ultimate," and it is. And it's not that we need it; we already have it, and we already are more than capable of dispensing that. So, and again, I think this is the future of Earth. I think we are coming towards a place where folks like you who are centered on let's work on local engagement and strengthening our communities and strengthening the bonds we have with the people around us, rather than fretting about what's going on in China or Russia or the Middle East or anywhere else. Let's really put the attention on home, because from there it just blossoms outward. You don't have to, those problems will become, the solution will become apparent once we start to embrace on a large scale this community living. And that's my vision, at least. That's my very particular
Yeah.
slant. But
I think in general that's a really good way to go. There is more nuance to it where like if you have resources that you can help, with something that's going on in a different part of the world, send resources. Yes, of course. But as far as getting fretting over that and getting so wrapped up in that in the daily routine, it's like, how is this being productive? We're just getting more divisive with each other over geopolitical differences, and yeah, so it's just not productive. But yeah, like you said, keeping the focus on local community, how can we strengthen relationships even with our own families, our own, and then going out from there, community, friends. Yeah, I wanted to mention before we close is I wanted to do kind of a dedication to your brother Mike O'Donnell, who is no longer on the planet, and really uh, send thanks to him for bringing us together as friends, making the introduction through him, and yeah, just curious what he's doing now. Like what next adventure he's moved on to. I really miss him, and there's times when I think about him, and yeah, a really amazing soul, your brother.
I appreciate that, man. That means a lot. He really did at the time feel like when I was growing up, like why is he so different, and why is he always against what my family's trying to do? And it felt like it was all this pain at the time. But now I see how much he was able to challenge those of us who needed challenging, yourself, me. Without him, I wouldn't be anywhere close to where I'm at now. I'm sure of that. I probably would have still been very immersed in Christianity and judgment, but he really was able to energetically open a new path for me, even if it was painful at the time and it felt like it was self-destructive at times. He really, and I'm so honored to hear that he had that same impact on you in a unique and different way, but just that he was able to kind of open our eyes to way more options than we were giving ourselves at the time, and challenging those normative things. So
I
yeah,
feel
I go ahead.
Oh, I feel like he was the definition of someone who is very much countercultural. He was the
Hmm.
counterculture influence coming in early in my life.
Well, you mentioned the darkness, or the dark, clothes and heavy music and stuff. Like, we were at a point in middle school and high school where my parents, it was probably still middle school, and I think around high school it finally kind of tapered off a bit, but they were forcing us to go to church, and if we didn't go to church we would get some kind of punishment, like we would lose
Oh man,
TV privileges for 2 days, or
that's heavy.
so yeah. And so my brother made a statement. He showed up with a trench coat, big black, full-length trench coat, with looking like Neo in the lobby scene, with his
The
shades
Matrix.
on, and just
Yeah.
sat there, just sit there in church with a kind of a wry smile on his
That's
face, and
hilarious.
just with those shades, and just cross his arms and be like, I could just feel it coming from him, like, this is such bullshit. Like, but it was, man, it was like kind of badass, because I'm like, well, you know what? He's still being respectful and honoring my parents, but he's also showing that I'm not just going to go along, bit by bit for this whole thing, and do exactly as you expect of me. And God, again, I'm so appreciative that he made that even an option in our family, because it did not feel like an option to me. I was so concerned about hurting the heart of my parents, and more importantly, God. How would he judge me if I made a mockery of his church? Well,
Right.
there was plenty of other things going on in those churches that were making a mockery of them by
Exactly.
themselves without my
Yeah.
need. So, but yeah, he was absolutely one of a kind in so many distinct ways, and he was very under celebrated. He was very underappreciated and unloved in a lot of that, and it was very painful to watch, his life kind of go off the rails after that accident, and all the pain he went through. But
Yeah.
with my new understanding, I feel like now I can see how. Uh-oh,
We're back.
you disappeared. Okay. Now it feels like, well, clearly he probably had more growth in this life than I could even possibly imagine, because I believe that the challenges we go through are the most rewarding to us on the other side, in terms of the things that we figure out and are able to grapple with. So
Absolutely.
I don't see his life as a tragedy, as a short, difficult, and painful thing. That it was that on one level, but it was also, I think, probably the most expansive and incredible journey he could have ever embarked on. And just glad we
Yeah.
both got to know him.
I have such fond memories of there was a time when I lived as a roommate in a house with him, and it was maybe a year before his accident or months before it. And I had such a nice experience being his roommate and getting to share all that time with him and just having all kinds of really great deep conversations with him. And spending a lot of quality time. Like I got a lot of quality time with him there before his accident, and also stayed in touch with him after too, more remotely. I wasn't able to. I came out once to visit in Georgia, and
Yeah, that was a big deal.
that was a big deal. And I'm really glad I got to make that trip and see him in person one last time. But yeah, I just keep going back to I was living on the Key Peninsula with him in this house that his friend had built, and it was just such a cool time, and just such fond memories of spending all that time with him and all those conversations. And yeah, we'd go play pool, and yeah, it was just a really nice time in my life.
Yeah, I know. I'm thankful that I got a few brief but short years with him also in that kind of time frame when I had moved back from going to school in Orlando and was engaged and living in an apartment by myself in Tacoma. And me and him would go play pool, and I'd come out to y'all's place and he'd do like a fish fry. And I remember smoking hash with him for the first time. And, there would always be the understanding that we were going to play Magic the Gathering. And
Oh, I remember playing that with him. Oh, it was so fun.
yeah,
Yeah.
but they'd always smoke me out beforehand, so I would be so high that I couldn't probably play like 5 card draw, let alone a game of Magic, which is super complex. So they'd hand me these cards, I'd be like reading them, I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah.
They just would have to like step by step every move tell me exactly what to do. And but like that was my brother was always kind of funny about that. He's like, nope, you don't get to smoke unless you play Magic with us. I'm like, all right. But I just remember some of the best times with him, just not being under the same, household with our parents there, just having that open relationship of like we can truly express ourselves. And that was when we became like we went from brothers to friends. And
That's
I really,
so valuable.
yeah, I mean, and he really had, I think, began to blossom in some really profound ways on his own. He still had his darkness and some of his shadow work to go through, but he was really making so much progress. And I think that's what made the accident sting that much worse, was seeing how he had really been trying to kind of pull his life together even much more recently before the accident. And it felt like at the time and for the longest time, like how unfair, like if there's a God, how ridiculous and absurd is he that he would torture a poor soul who was always told he was wrong pretty much his entire growing up, finally gets to find himself a little bit, and then is cut down. His body is, just wrecked in the process. I mean, that it sounds like a total tragedy, but again, I'm choosing to believe he is way better off than we are right now where he's at.
Yeah.
He's
I think he went through a lot of growth through that experience too, and it all unfolded the way it needed to. And there's a divine perfection to it all. Yeah.
Yeah, which is hard to accept because it
It
sounds
is.
bleak
Yeah.
to say, well, his path was being paralyzed and having all these problems. But again, we're all very unaware right now of what
We
the purpose
can't
of our journey is.
Yeah, we can't see
But
all the hidden dynamics of like what makes for soul growth for certain individuals, and like yeah, we just don't know. So it's can't judge any of it.
yeah, and I just choose to look at his life as a victory and as a blessing. And I know I'll see him as soon as I exit this body. I know we're going to be reunited in a way that I can't even comprehend. And same with anyone and any family member they've ever lost. We haven't lost anyone. That's, I think, a really profound thing to grab onto is no one's ever gone. They're just temporarily removed from our perception.
Yeah,
So
exactly. And it's flipped. We're still in the dream and they're waking up.
yeah, I know. I mean, I'm jealous of him now. So not truly, but there are times where it certainly feels like I'm going to really appreciate being back in the light body and being in the astral or wherever, and out of the physical difficulties of this particular body. But again, it's all about framing it. I think that maybe I was given all these physical difficulties to continue to drive me towards this idea that I'm not defined by those. They aren't really who I am. And
Yeah. I think
defining my life by those pains has been a path to destruction.
I think when I get back to the spirit world, I'm gonna really enjoy it, but I'm also gonna miss the tacos.
That's true, man. That's true. That's why we do this, right? We're like, hey, but it's so fun to eat tacos and listen to music and
The sunsets are
have this.
great. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much beauty, and I love that you gravitate towards all of the good things in life. That's another thing Mary was going on about in a previous podcast was, she's like, I don't, people get all down and doom and gloom and hate the world and think it's dark and evil. She's like, I love this place. I love
Yeah.
being in it and participating in life, pains and all. And I'm just like, man, that's such a place I aspire to grow to is truly looking at this life as a privilege, as a something that is rare and exciting and unique instead of this great torture chamber and
Yeah.
school, like even thinking of it as a school in a negative way, but like you
Yeah.
can flip that, think of the cool a cool school that you've been to, or a school that exists in your mind that's open and fun, and it doesn't have to be all these definitions we try and make it. So
Yeah. Let's make it into art school and music school.
that's what I hope, man. I believe that is the path we're going towards, because we've done all the rest of it, and it's not as fun doing the othering, and I don't want to say the big C word and get into a capitalism versus communism debate, but let's face it, we've seen the destructive nature of endlessly commodifying everything that you need to live and reducing people down to a production unit. If you're
Yeah.
not a valuable production unit in society, you're essentially slowly moved through a pipeline to the streets or jail or worse. And so we have to dream, in my opinion, we have to dream much bigger than just looking at ourselves through these lenses of value in these arbitrary ways, and see the deeper value, and then we can create all the art and music and community that we could never even dreamed about before, when we were so locked into all this
Yeah.
this other way. But that's at least my hope, that this is what we're rapidly moving towards in this
Yeah.
lifetime, and that's why you and I came here to experience it, was so we could be part of that awakening. But
Yeah.
who knows?
There's a lot of work to be done here, but there's also a lot of creativity and brilliant minds and heart-centered, wonderful people that are working on cleaning this place up all together now. Yeah,
Yep.
and that brings me to one thing I wanted to mention was, have you watched Yellow Submarine, the original 1968 Beatles film
I am pretty sure I
recently?
did, actually, but it's been at least 20 years ago since I saw it.
So a friend of mine had a birthday where he rented out a movie theater, and we watched Yellow Submarine on the big screen, the remastered Dolby Digital surround, and it was incredible, both in the animation, the music, the sound effects, and the storyline. The storyline's very simple. I mean, it doesn't have a big plot, but the simplicity of the all you need is love, and the inclusion, and that people just want love, including the blue meanies. It's like it's got some it's got some juice in it that's very relevant to our current day time. Like, for people that haven't seen it in a while, I highly recommend watching it again, because it's just so. I came out of it just blown away by how relevant it still is and how beautiful. So, Yellow
That's
Submarine.
awesome. I need to check it back out. It was probably 25 years ago, and I think it was probably middle school or high school. I got it from the library. I was always renting movies from the library, and I remember being really surprised. I thought it was going to be kind of a dumb, hokey, oh, this is old, it's probably going to be really lame. And I remember really enjoying it. I don't remember the details as vividly since I haven't seen it in a long time, but I can still remember the feeling after watching it, of feeling lightened and feeling
Yeah,
like, oh,
it's
that was fun. That was really nice. Not the
yep.
usual stuff I'm after, where I'm challenging all the deep, dark thoughts about reality. I gravitate towards intense sci-fis and all that stuff, but it'd probably be better for me to watch Yellow Submarine a few times, and uh,
Yeah, it's a good vibe, and it's got a lot of really great puns and humor in it, and trippiness. It's very psychedelic, of course, but in a lot of really creative ways. And the animation style was very innovative for its time, and very beautiful, the way that they did the variation and the types of mixed media animation they did, and it goes along with the music so well. And there's just so many moments that I love from that film, and I was so thankful my friend did that for his birthday, because it's like I rediscovered it. I hadn't seen it in many years. So
That's awesome.
yeah.
Well, everyone go watch Yellow Submarine if you haven't recently, and give yourself a smile.
Yeah. That's my recommendation.
Nice. Well, Sean, I will have to cut you loose here, and I'm super thankful for taking as much time as you have to share your life, your story, the little nuggets we were able to get in between my monologuing. And yeah, man, I'm really excited for the future for you, for the podcast, for the music, the video, your chocolate business, the tortillas. I mean, you got a lot of cool stuff going on, and I'm really excited that I know you and I'm able to enjoy your light as well.
Thank you, David. It means so much, and it's such an honor. This is my first interview on a podcast, and you've been so gracious and wonderful, and I've enjoyed it so much. So thank you.
Dude, the pleasure was all here, and you're a great guest and a great host, even better host, I would say, because you're in the moment and you're able to articulate yourself in a really distinct way. And I really appreciate what you're offering with the podcast. And I hope that you have, I know you've kind of got an expectation that it's not going to be something that will catch fire, but I really hope it does. I really hope that you find an audience as well, and people who are just going into things with their hearts and want to hear other people hearts forward talking about life.
Thank you.
A little more of it.
Appreciate that so much, man.
Yeah, dude. Well, on that note, don't forget to check out Bonbons Nook, the Bonbons Nook podcast. And of course, Bonbons Nook. Is it thebonbonsnook.com or is it just Bonbons?
Yeah, it's the Bonbons Nook podcast on the streaming platforms, and then bonbonsnook.com. And I like to say it like Bonbons Nook.
I know we didn't get into the bonbon too much, but then of course Pure Love Chocolate, and then what was the web services?
So my tech support, training, website support for like WordPress, Wix, all that stuff. That's starchildcreative.com, and you can see all my many tech services that I've accumulated over the years from doing different things.
Nice. All right, man. Well, it's great talking to you, and I definitely would love to have you back on in the future. So
I would love to be back on in the future, and I'm looking forward to having you on my podcast in the next few weeks. Can't wait for that too.
Sweet. Good deal, man. All right. Well, you take care, and I will talk to you soon.
All right. Take her easy, as you would say, or your brother would say. You both have the same kind of sayings. I love it. You remind me so much of him. Yeah. Take her easy.
That's crazy. Yeah, I guess he definitely stuck with me.
Yeah.
So I say it all the time. That's right. Take her easy, man.
Take her easy.
Well, he didn't do the Southern accent.
That's your own embellishment.
Yep. All right, man. I will talk to you later.
Peace.